Oh man, I need water.
Cool. First one is, like we said, it's like very sympathetic to Judas, right? So like what would you have done if you were Judas, if you're in that situation? And like, I don't know, there's like a lot of parts in one of his song where he's like, now if I help you, it matters that you see these sort of kind of things are coming hard to me. It's taken me some time to work out what to do. I weighed the whole thing out before I came to you. I have no thought at all about my own reward. I really didn't come here of my own accord. So it seems like he feels like he's being like guided to do these things. So like, how are you going to choose not to do them? And then what I also think it's interesting to think about is, do you think Jesus knew that he would die from the beginning? Like, I think real life Jesus kind of like knew from the get-go, at least in my interpretation. But Jesus, from this perspective, like Jesus is like just a man. When did he realize that he was gonna like die, And then also just thoughts and comments. So like that word.
What would I have done if I was Judas?
Yeah.
I would have done the right thing. I wouldn't have turned Jesus in. I would have
But what is the right thing?
I would have just followed him. Obviously, go along with Jesus. I mean, he's totally not like a megalomaniac at all.
Right. You just wouldn't have gotten yourself in that position in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. Or just be like Peter, play it cool until afterwards.
To me, that feels worse. Like, I feel like what I really admire about this is like, okay, Judas thought that there was a right thing to do, and he did it. Like he was absolutely wrong, but
Oh, I don't think he was wrong in this story.
Mm.
Well, maybe. I couldn't tell if he knew that they were gonna kill Jesus or not.
I don't think he realized in this interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think even considering Jesus as an avatar, Judas still wasn't wrong. Like I think he makes some good points in terms of like God needed a villain. You know what I mean? If God needs a villain, it's kind of like on God.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And I think that's actually the deeper symbolism of the kiss.
Mm.
That Judas played a crucial role in the unfolding of the crucifixion and the resurrection. Jesus was totally aware of it the entire time, literally told him, do what you need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
And I also think in terms of the real Jesus story, that Judas symbolizes a part of our minds, that are really trying to protect ourself.
Yeah.
Oh no, a bug just flew into my mouth. May it have a fortuitous rebirth. Anyway, to me, Judas represents a part of our minds is trying to protect ourself. It doesn't actually understand what our real self is, so it's trying to protect a false self, our idea of ourselves. But it's really doing its best to do the right thing.
It's trying really hard.
So like Mary Magdalene, for example, in the part where Mary Magdalene is putting the perfume on Jesus's feet, Mary Magdalene represents the part of our mind that is paying attention to our transcendence or our divine nature, and valuing that. And then Judas comes along and says, no, we need to give that we could have sold that and given the money to the poor, and there's so many times along the line where Judas is saying things that are like kind of make sense in a certain way, but really are missing the point and are actually coming from a selfish place, even though it seems like they're not, they really are.
And what I really like about like Jerome Proudhon's like performance is that I feel like you can see that. You can see that he's being like
Yes.
sophistic as he's making these arguments and not actually like making them for their own sake. And yeah, oh my God, I love what you just said about what they symbolize and like what parts of your mind they symbolize. And like Judah, he even starts with like, my mind is clearer now. It's very much like, okay, let's just look from just this one narrow part of the mind, but it's like the
Right.
limited contains the whole, right? So we can also see
Yeah.
all
So
the other
yeah, and let me
implications.
just to wrap up my view on the symbolism
Okay,
there.
yeah.
Um, the that part of our mind is actually, it plays a crucial role in self-realization
Mhm.
because it keeps highlighting, bringing to our attention these parts of our minds that are diluted.
Yeah,
And it goes actually all the way to crucifying even our idea of ourselves, or our idea of God. um that I think is that's what points to the resurrection. Judas plays a crucial role in that. And
yeah.
then afterwards he ends up killing himself,
Hmm.
which I think kind of all of that points to a just a complete transformation of the mind
Yeah,
and the
like
self
the destruction of the.
and God. But yeah, I agree. The actor's portrayal of Judas was so multidimensional.
Hmm.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool. Um, yeah, and I also really like you were saying that Jesus is like aware the whole time, and he's even like, okay, go ahead and do it. Like I feel like the whole time Jesus is always reaching for Judas, even as Judas is in the process of betraying him, and even after he's
Mhm.
already done it. And I always
Yeah.
found that like really beautiful and like heartening, you know what I mean? Because like sometimes you feel like
Mhm.
you're Judas, you know, like you feel like in one way or another you're betraying God.
Right. Yeah. And we all are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um,
Um,
and I don't know, I just think it's so beautiful to me, like the story of the prodigal son, you know, to like have Jesus like reaching back always, always, you know.
uh-huh. Yeah, Jesus was actually, in the real story, Jesus was embracing Judas the whole time. In this story, Jesus was pretty passive aggressive to Judas. And I thought, oh man, I died at the Last Supper when he says, "For all you care, this cup could be
Yeah,
my blood. For all you care, this bread could be my body." Oh, that was hilarious.
yeah. I love.
So
There's so
passive
many.
aggressive.
There are so many cool moments like that. But I think even when he's doing that stuff, like that stuff is just part of the play, you know what I mean? But like
Uh-huh.
still in his body language, he's always reaching for Judas, I feel like.
True.
Yeah.
True, yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I don't know that I have any more deep thoughts, so I think I might stop the recording unless you have more stuff and then we can keep hanging or not.
Well, I guess the only other thing that I'd like to mention is just the general theme of the musical. I don't know, is it a musical? Is it a rock opera? What is it?
Yeah, it's a rock opera from the time.
Yeah, I think the general theme of the rock opera, like you said, is like, what if Jesus was just some dude
Yeah.
and not God? Which I kind of love because our general cultural narrative when it comes to Jesus is to really emphasize his divinity. And people think of him as God in a way that is absolutely exclusive to him and so far beyond anything that we would ever be.
Hmm.
Um, and so they think of him kind of on this pedestal, in this like faraway heaven of divinity, when the real point of Jesus's whole avatarhood was that he was fully human and fully divine, both. And you can see both of those elements in the whole story of his life. You have the miracles and his unflagging transcendence throughout his entire life and his love, but you also have extremely human moments, like some that you saw in Jesus Christ Superstar, like where the money changers are in the temple and he just loses his shit and flips the tables and everything. Or and like in the Garden of Gethsemane, which I think they played up again, made it kind of passive aggressive towards God in this
I know
one.
he's so
Uh,
mad at God.
but but it was pretty angsty even in the Bible. And you could tell he was scared, and he was having a very human moment of like, I don't want to go through all this pain and suffering. And if there's any way to not, can we do it some other way? You know, a very, very human moment from Jesus, which he ends, of course, with, but not my will, yours.
Yeah.
Um, and um, and I think in a culture where we have completely lost sight of Jesus's humanity, been blinded by his divinity, I think a creation like this is probably just exactly what we need. So
That,
that it
oh my
really
God.
emphasizes his humanity. Yeah, so
Yeah,
I love that.
that makes so much sense that like this would come about because, you know, this, I think Andrew Lloyd Webber is like British, but you know, like the British American like kind of combined cultural
Mhm.
norm, like of course that then they would be hungering for something like this where he's just a man. And it's also an aspect that I really enjoyed. I grew up, I went to like a Jesuit school, and the Jesuit
Mm.
tradition like really emphasizes the Jesus is your brother, Jesus is 100% human. um
Yeah.
so I feel like that's what made Jesus really appealing to me as a child, so I also really like it.
Cool.
um
Yeah.
yeah. And like, I don't know, I think another interesting question that this poses is towards the end, in the kind of scene where the he's carrying the cross, and Judas is like, why did you come in 4 BC instead of coming now when there's mass communication? And to me, like incorporating like other avatars like Ramakrishna is like what answers that question to me. Like, you know, like you can just come as many times as you need to come, and then just work with whatever is,
Right.
you know. And like, I don't know, I think a lot of the anachronistic things are so cool in it, like you said, the moment when they're in the temple and there's like TVs and stuff, but it is still 4 BC somehow. um there was one more
Yeah.
thing about what you said that I wanted to respond to, and now I forgot.
Mm. That's okay.
Yeah,
If it needs to come back, it will.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I just think one of the things I really love about the Jesus story is that we tend to view divinity and humanity as opposed to one another.
mhm,
Whether or not we are thinking explicitly about that, it's kind of baked into how most of us think, um, which makes total sense to the dualistic perspective,
yeah,
right? God is eternal. God is God is all loving, all knowing, all these things. We have all these ideas about what God is. And I'm just a human being. I was born, I'm gonna die. And there are definitely some things I don't love. There are probably things I hate. Um, and um, and I certainly don't know very much. Um,
yeah,
and so we think there's no way that these two things could be together in one place.
right,
But the reality of the situation is that they are, and that the human experience, really at the deepest level, is a complete embrace of our divinity and our humanity both, and to see that there's an intrinsic value to both of them, and that they not only can both be present simultaneously, but they're just different aspects of the same thing.
and they enrich each other, which I think is nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And when you can fully embrace both of them, really I think mostly what needs embraced is our humanity. We're pretty willing to embrace divinity for the most part. But when you can fully embrace both of them, yeah, it just deepens on both aspects, just deepen and really come to fruition in a beautiful way, where you have the absolute oneness of our divinity and the perfect uniqueness of our humanity.
yeah,
Uh, and it's this very beautiful thing.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, and I was thinking about the, it's very nice to like embrace them both, right? I think the only like limitation of the like, what if he's just some man point of view is that then it's a bummer. Then you end before the resurrection. You don't even get the resurrection.
Yeah.
So I think that's why most of us eventually come to like, okay, divinity. Okay, let's have both, you know, because just
Uh,
humanity also is just not as fun.
oh yeah, it sucks. It sucks on its
Yeah,
own. Yeah, because everything feels so high stakes too. From just the human
the
perspective, it's
believer.
like, man, I'm trying as hard as I can to survive, and I'm definitely gonna fail. And I gotta do anything I can to avoid confronting that reality,
Like the
you
only
know?
certainty is death, and that's like the one
Yeah.
thing I don't want to think about.
Yeah, and that's like, and that's most people view death as a worst case scenario, you
Right.
know, when it's actually definitely gonna happen. It's not a failure of any kind.
I thought it was so
Um,
funny when Jesus was having his like angsty moment, and in the chat you were like, "Come on, bro, we're all gonna die. Like you're not special."
yeah, yeah, take it
Like
easy, dude.
exactly, he's not
It
special. We're
happens to
all
all of us.
Jesus.
Oh
So
man. Um, oh, and there was another thing that I was gonna say about the emphasis on Jesus's humanity.
Mhm.
Oh, yes. So here's another reason why I loved this take on it of Jesus as some dude, is that if you interpret a lot of what Jesus said um, as him talking about himself as a person,
Mm,
then um, not only does he really seem like kind of a megalomaniac and potentially delusional, um, he also, if you also believe that he was God, but you're really fixated on his humanity, on his name and his shape, then then you can get some really harmful, exclusive ideas
mm,
about what God is and what spirituality is. So let's take for instance his when he said, "I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me." Now, if you take that he was talking about just his humanity, about
mhm.
himself as a person, then then you might go and try and convert the entire world to believe in Jesus as the exclusive Son of God,
Right.
so that they can know God, because there's no other way that they could know God, or they could know the truth, or they could know the way or the life except
Yeah,
through Jesus,
yeah.
right?
Those two views like
And then
can't
what's that?
those two views like can't coexist, you know, like that he's just a man
Yes.
and that he said things like this. And I think that's even why
Uh-huh.
like lines like those aren't in this musical, you know what I mean? Because it just like doesn't make sense for him to say something like that if he's just
Yeah, I think you could have put it in there. And I think there were moments in the play that were a little bit like that, where it was like, because it helped looking at Jesus through the lens of just his humanity and him saying things like that, it makes you more sympathetic to Judas, right? Because
yeah,
you're like, oh,
yeah,
actually,
yeah.
this is getting out of hand.
Yeah, no,
You
I
know,
think especially
like
at the beginning when he's talking to the apostles and he says something and he's looking up and the like light is hitting his face and it's like clearly like invoking a god vibe.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so yeah, so if you're fixated on his humanity, you hear this, you can only come to the Father through me, then you're like, okay, this is Jesus Christ, he's the superstar, you know,
Yeah.
the only superstar. But actually, that's one of the deepest lines in the whole Bible. And if you look at it from another perspective of Jesus talking from the perspective of unity, of the one, of the God that's looking out through your eyes and my eyes and sensing itself through all of existence, the one, then it's a totally different line. We are the truth and the life and the way, And no one comes to the Father. You could think of the Father as formless awareness, and of Jesus or the Son or the way, the truth, and the life as our experience in form with shapes and names and things, the creation. No one comes to the formless except through the form. No one comes to the one except through the one, you know? Uh, and then it makes total sense, and you have this universal perspective on it. You realize somebody could have never heard of Jesus, but if they if they have any access to the truth or the life or the way that things are, then they know Jesus. They know Jesus' real presence because that's what Jesus is. He's the truth. He's the way. He's our lives. He's our life. And just because somebody hasn't heard his name doesn't mean they don't know his presence. Um,
Yeah.
so I appreciated it for that too, because I think it kind of highlighted how sometimes Jesus gets interpreted, which is as
Mm.
he's saying things from the perspective of oneness, but
Yeah.
people are interpreting it. He's saying it as a human being, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I feel like a
which would
lot of
make him crazy.
the I feel like a lot of the Judas like lines and perspective are also kind of like with this awareness of what people will do to Jesus and Jesus's name after, you know what I
Mm,
mean? Because it was written in the
yeah,
70s, you know what I mean? Like especially
totally.
in the beginning when he says like everything you say today, your words gets twisted around some other way, you know, like all
Mm-hmm.
these sort of things. And like Simon's like whole like, we'll fight for you, Jesus, like Jesus, obviously
Mm-hmm.
foreshadowing like the Crusades and stuff. So I think it's
Yeah.
a really interesting dynamic of the anachronism of it.
Yeah, you're so right about that. And yeah, so probably some of that was intentional of understanding that even those like the deep things that Jesus said tend to get interpreted a lot of times in pretty harmful ways. Um I love when they can shed light on that in a way that makes us laugh too, because we're people are so much more willing to acknowledge uncomfortable things when we're laughing,
Yeah, we
right?
love like a sassy Judas, you know?
Yes. Like, oh yeah, actually has a point there.
Yeah, it's really good. Cool. I'm so glad you liked it. That makes me really happy.
Yeah, I'm glad your secular friends wouldn't watch it with you so that I
Right.
got to see it.
We saved it for them. Nice, nice, nice.
Yeah.
Should we close with a prayer and then stop the recording?
Sure.
All right. I'm gonna do the Holy Mother, but I'm gonna do it in Portuguese because I don't know it in English. So
Cool.
Ave Maria, cheia de graça, o Senhor é convosco, bendita sois vós entre as mulheres, bendito é o fruto de vosso ventre, Jesus. Santa Maria, Mãe de Deus, rogai por nós, os pecadores, agora e na hora de nossa morte. Amém.
Amen.